Dallas Mavericks fans, MFFLs all across the world. The Dallas Mavericks have finalized that 15-man roster. I know it's been a while since I've been here, but I had to get some things taken care of. But now we're going to dive into a little bit just what the Dallas Mavericks were able to do in this offseason. I'm going to say Nico Harrison. This is a guy we've started to build some trust in. I'm going to say myself especially. I'm a big fan of what Nico Harrison has done since he has taken the job as general manager or whatever that role is, or roster personnel choices and decision making. That's been he's played. I guess you want to say he's played a major part in what the Dallas Mavericks have been able to do since he got here. We're also talking about a couple years ago the Dallas Mavericks making that Western Conference Finals run against the Golden State Warriors 2022. Obviously Jalen Brunson, and bringing back a guy that was very familiar with what Jason Kidd is asking for, and a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie. And to me personally, it's going to be obviously a different role than what he was accustomed to, and that's his first stint with the Dallas Mavericks, because now you've added in a Kyrie Irving, who of course we talk about the NBA Finals. Kyrie Irving, a little bit of a roller coaster ride, up and down series for himself, but we do know still the spectacular player that he is. Obviously should have been, in my personal opinion, like I've said many times, Luka Doncic should have been MVP. We know the talent that he is, dealing with the injuries, and now I'm gonna say no one's rooting for him to be sitting at home if he wants to play in the overseas. We're talking about the Olympics, but unfortunately his team, Slovenia, the national team, did not qualify for the Olympics this year, so Luka Doncic is going to be able to get some well-needed rest and some well-deserved rest. I'll also add in, because now we're going to see what exactly Luka Doncic's ceiling is going forward. Now he's got that monkey off his back. He's been to an NBA Finals. It didn't go the way he wanted, talking about in team success, but Luka Doncic, he created a lot of noise now because you have something to look forward to. Now going to 2 Western Conference Finals, you're now talking about also now having an NBA Finals appearance. Luka Doncic, you know, he has to be hungry. He has to want more for this team. And talk about the pieces that we've added in since last I guess I want to say the All-Star break last year, during the regular season. We're now going to say, what is the ceiling for this team? Because again, there are some few pieces that we're not talking about. Obviously, we can get to the common sense guys. Klay Thompson, that's a guy I'm going to say, obviously, he is we're talking about the one half of that Splash Brothers, now famously known as the Splash Brothers, in his tenure with the Golden State Warriors. And I'm going to say, to me personally, the second best shooter of all time, because obviously we do know what he is and what he's become very accustomed to. When you're playing against a guy, with a guy like Steph Curry, the gravity that he brings, Luka Doncic does something very similar. Now, it may not be the exact same, but we're talking about the gravity. Luka Doncic, he has all eyes on him as soon as he crosses half court, kind of similar to what a Steph Curry can bring. So what is that going to do? That's going to open up many opportunities for a guy like Klay Thompson. The Dallas Mavericks are now going to find themselves in a position to figure out what exactly Jason Kidd as a coach. Because I'm going to say Jason Kidd, I've given him some flack here and there, because to me sometimes I'm not really the fan of kind of sitting and letting I guess things play out every single season, because sometimes we've seen Jason Kidd at many different tenures, against many different points, I will say, in his tenure with the Dallas Mavericks as the head coach. He likes to kind of do these, these assessments of the team in increments, quarterly of the season, and to me personally, I feel like that can get you in trouble when you're talking about the Western Conference, especially a very tight Western Conference. And to me, going into next season, this is going to be an even tougher conference, we're going to say, but especially talking about the division that the Dallas Mavericks also play in. We're talking about the Dallas Mavericks themselves. You have the Dallas Mavericks. Then you're talking about what could be an upbeat team, a young team on the rise, who did have a little bit of an issue towards the end of the season, but the Houston Rockets, that's a very young team, but with some talent. You're talking about the New Orleans Pelicans. You're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder, the San Antonio Spurs. This is going to be year 2 for Victor Wembanyama under Greg Popovich, and we've seen they tried to add in a few things, the addition of a veteran like Chris Paul. That is going to be a team to keep an eye on. So if we're talking about the Western Conference as a whole, but the division that the Dallas Mavericks play in, this is going to be very interesting and exciting, because also going back to the series the Dallas Mavericks had against the Oklahoma City Thunder, this can, so I guess you want to say in certain ways, can turn into somewhat I guess you want to say maybe a rivalry going forward, but we'll see. Obviously, it's too early to speak on that. But let me talk about just really quick what the Dallas Mavericks were able to do in this offseason, whether it was with trades or whether it's just bringing in some young, some new additional pieces to be able to help the Dallas Mavericks finally get over that hump. Going into the offseason, I'm going to say, obviously, there were some things that the Dallas Mavericks had to improve on. And I'm going to say, obviously, the number one thing we saw from the NBA Finals especially was just offensive production. We have guys, again, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, when he's rolling and he's finding himself in the right situations. Those are two guys that can spearhead an entire offense. But what happens when you have a team with the pieces and you have a head coach with the philosophy to do things like the Boston Celtics can do? And we saw many times during the NBA Finals, the Boston Celtics had no issue with just allowing Luka Doncic to get his one-on-one and then just not allowing other guys to go off from getting open looks. And then when there were open looks sometimes behind the three-point line especially, you saw many guys just failing to knock down shots, and you cannot have that when you're going to have a guy like Luka Doncic who is ball dominant. And I'm gonna say at certain points Kyrie Irving can be ball dominant because that's the way Jason Kidd likes to run this offense. Those are our top two guys, and we need to kind of figure out how we can open up some of these other, I guess you want to say some of these other pieces. But when you have that, you're going to have guys that can knock down shots. The Dallas Mavericks, Nico Harrison, once again, I will give so much credit for attacking something like this, because we do know Klay Thompson, I guess you want to say it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride towards the end of his tenure with the Golden State Warriors, and he wasn't happy with the way that they kind of were treating him, I guess, when it comes to an extension, a new contract. And one thing you're going to say about Nico Harrison, the first thing he said when he joined the Dallas Mavericks, the organization, he says, we're always going to have a seat at the table. Let's be very clear. We're going to now always be somewhere on that table, around that table, to get some conversation with some of these pieces around the league. Especially when you're talking about a guy like Klay Thompson. What is he going to be asked to do? Come in, knock down open shots. And one thing I'm going to say for Klay Thompson, we can talk about, is he the same player that he used to be? Obviously not, because we're talking about dealing with some Achilles issues and the guy pretty much missing 2 full seasons and some change a little bit. I guess you want to say just due to those injuries. One thing I'm still going to say now, because we're talking about a guy like Klay Thompson, I believe averaged over 17 points a game last year, and you heard so much. He had a down year, but he leads the league, I believe, in free throw percentage, 93%. But a guy in a down year still knocks down 39% from the three-point line on about 9 attempts. This is nothing that the Dallas Mavericks are going to be able to be disappointed about, to me, in my personal opinion, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a knockdown spot-up shooter. This is a guy, I feel like, at certain points, Jason Kidd, if he's smart at all, you're going to have to kind of take some things away from the Golden State Warriors offense at certain points, try to open up some other things. We're going to have to, because at some point, I don't want to see Klay Thompson just be completely relegated to just being a spot-up corner shooter, because we do know some of these guys can turn into that. But also, we're talking about a PJ Washington. We're talking about who now is with the Los Angeles Clippers, Derrick Jones Jr. He was not a guy that we're going to be able to say was an offensive piece for us, and we saw that show up a lot in the NBA Finals. Derrick Jones Jr. was a very great defender for us, and I'm going to say a point of attack defender. That's one of those terms you've heard spoken about lots and lots over the playoffs especially, but this offseason so far. You heard a point of attack defender, a guy that can kind of just be able to get up inside his man and stick with them, because we saw at some certain points, the Dallas Mavericks, we get blown by sometimes, and we have seen that can cause some issues on our big man, because one thing that is going to bring is going to have to allow a guy like Dereck Lively, who, to me, in my personal opinion, going into year 2 for him, this is a guy you're going to be able to see a little bit more of that Tyson Chandler role. And I'm going to say he's going to get a lot of credit going forward. He's going to have lots of eyes on him, and he's going to start getting lots of love, because around the league, we're talking about a team that was just in the NBA Finals. The national media, the number one thing you're going to be asking yourself, especially when you have a Luka Doncic, especially when you have a Klay Thompson now, especially when you have a Kyrie Irving also as well, obviously, you're going to be asking some questions and saying, can this team do it again? So a guy like Dereck Lively, he is going to be able to be that defensive presence. We've seen with Daniel Gafford, who I believe now, it was reported pretty much early on in this offseason that Dereck Lively is going to be your starting center going forward. That's the way the franchise looks at it now. So Daniel Gafford still being a defensive presence at certain points and certain spots in a game. we have got to have defenders on the perimeter that can just be solid. I'm not expecting Klay Thompson to come in and be Derrick Jones Jr. level from what we got last year, but I'm going to be expecting Klay Thompson to just be smart. And at some points, you hear, especially around the league, Klay Thompson with the Warriors, he's lost a step. He's not as quick. He's not as agile. The lateral movement is not where it used to be. But I'm going to say, I believe this is going to be a perfect system because you do still have a guy like PJ Washington, who we saw improve immensely on the defensive side of the ball. And now we could have to work on his offensive game and open up some other things for this team going forward. But adding a guy like Klay Thompson on a 3-year deal to replace, again, what you somehow lost, we don't have to get into with the Derrick Jones Jr. saga, because obviously Nico Harrison comes to the offseason and he says Derrick Jones Jr. is maybe priority 1 and priority 2 to be able to bring back. But he fought, I guess at some points, somehow the wires got crossed up. Derrick Jones Jr. changes his agency. And now you're going to be looking at saying, okay, how can we replace this? And one thing I will always give Nico Harrison a lot of credit for, he doesn't sit on his hands. He doesn't wait around. And that's why you brought in a guy, Najee Marshall, from the New Orleans Pelicans. This is going to be a guy, I'm going to say, when you're talking about what Najee Marshall is going to be able to bring to the Dallas Mavericks, he is going to be more of that linebacker type defender. He's not going to be as quick, as agile, or as athletic as a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. Just, I guess you want to say, just raw athletic ability. But he's very smart and he's very physical. And to me, we've seen some at certain points, if you paid attention to the Pelicans games and seen some of those matchups that he's had against teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, especially dealing with a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's given him some issue because, again, he's a bigger body and he's going to play physical. And also, what we're going to say, hopefully, we're going to be able to get from a guy like that, Najee Marshall, is a more consistent three-point shooter himself. I'm also going to add in the fact, I don't want people to get lost in the fact that we're talking about we need guys to just knock down shots, because one thing I'm going to say, I am not a fan of just completely loading up on just nothing but 3-and-D players, because at some point, you're still going to have to create your own shot if a play breaks down. And we saw sometimes those are some issues that the NBA Finals and the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals exposed a little bit. And when you were talking about Luka Doncic is not maybe at his best, or he's not completely healthy. Excuse me. When you're looking at Kyrie Irving and saying maybe he's not playing up to his most capable ability, then you're going to be saying, what can we have other guys around that can kind of create their shots here and there? That's why Dallas Mavericks fans obviously have been very big on a guy like Jaden Hardy. We wanted to kind of see him progress and be brought along a little bit more. And obviously clearing out some of that space now, we're no longer having Tim Hardaway Jr. on this team. We're going to look at a guy like Jaden Hardy potentially be able to add in some of those pieces. But when you're adding in a Klay Thompson and you're adding in a guy, like I said, Najee Marshall, who I feel is a more capable playmaker. This is a guy that has some passing ability. This is a guy that can kind of get a bucket here and there. I'm not going to say he's a bucket getter or anything like that, but I feel like the Dallas Mavericks are just making themselves more versatile as a team, and I don't see how that can be anything negative to look at all. So going forward, so the Dallas Mavericks, again, we're going to have some pieces to add in, but also there's another additional piece that I'm going to say the Dallas Mavericks were able to get in that Detroit Pistons trade, the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, I guess we can call it whatever at this point, bringing in a guy like Quentin Grimes. And this is still a young guy. I think, 25 years old, somewhere around there, 24, 25 years old. Quentin Grimes is, to me, going to be one of those sneaky Mavs fan favorite type players. We've seen those guys throughout the years with the Dallas Mavericks, but I'm going to say Quentin Grimes, this is going to be a guy who has the ability to knock down some open three-point shots. And again, we're talking about a guy a couple years ago with the New York Knicks. He was looked at as one of those untouchable pieces. And again, it's very interesting because we know in the NBA, the resume is always, have you updated your resume? What have you done for me now? I don't want to hear what you did a couple years ago. And then he ends up being traded off to the somehow with the Detroit Pistons, and you're asking yourself, what exactly went wrong? I'm going to say at the end of the day, sometimes a change of scenery, a change of environment is the biggest thing that you need going forward, especially we're talking about he's still a guy, and I'm going to say in the young part of his career, 24, 25-year-old guy, like I said, Quentin Grimes, which the Dallas Mavericks, if you're looking at this roster, this is a fairly young roster pretty much. You're now looking at Klay Thompson, you're looking at a guy like Kyrie Irving, who are your veterans at this point. You're looking at Spencer Dinwiddie to a certain extent. But now, we're not the oldest team in the league by by any stretch of the imagination. So bringing in some of these other young guys who I feel, like I said, a Quentin Grimes, he's going to give you tenacity. I'm going to say a tenacious defender on the perimeter. That's the biggest thing, because again, when you're talking about playing for the Dallas Mavericks and playing for Jason Kidd, we have now started to flip the narrative of what the Dallas Mavericks are. It's always kind of been, this is an offensive team. They can't really play defense. But we saw in the second half of the season last year, after the All-Star break, obviously bringing in PJ Washington, bringing in Daniel Gafford, and then just implementing what Derrick Jones Jr., some of these other guys were able to do. We're going to say the Dallas Mavericks are a team who is going to have to focus on defense. I don't need us to even be as great as we were last year in the second half of the season, I'll say, because I think when you look at the total stats at the end of the season, I believe we ended up finishing by 17th in pretty much in total defense, but we know we were much better. I think we were floating around that top 2, top 3 range for the whole entirety of the second half after the All-Star break, because the Dallas Mavericks, once they got those pieces installed and once we got to see what guys are actually capable of, the Dallas Mavericks took off, and we saw defense being one of the main focal points of this team. But if we're able to just even scale back a little bit, but give more and improve much more on the offensive end and just being more versatile, like I said, one thing you're going to ask for from a guy like Quentin Grimes, what thing you're going to ask for from a guy like Najee Marshall, especially going to be bench players, can you come in and make plays when you need to? I feel like Quentin Grimes is also an underrated guy when you're talking about being able to go get a bucket and get to the rim as well. These are not some of the things that we got used to. You saw some guys like last year getting some playing time for us, Dante Exum at certain stretches of the season. And then you're talking about some of these other guys who are just not really comfortable with being able to come in and get their own shot necessarily. That is something I think the Dallas Mavericks have improved on a lot. So adding in a Klay Thompson, who I feel like still has some left in the still has some game left in the tank, and he says himself, one thing you can't do, he says in the press conference, I believe, you cannot leave me open. You cannot leave Klay Thompson open by any stretch of the imagination, especially we're talking about a guy who's coming in wearing that number 31, who we got so famously used to. We're talking about a guy, I remember Nick Van Exel wearing it when I was younger for the Dallas Mavericks. Then you're talking about a guy like Jason Terry wearing the number 31, who we get very used to, helped lead the Dallas Mavericks to an NBA Finals. We're talking about, and also helping lead with Dirk Nowitzki to that first NBA championship for the Dallas Mavericks. So that wearing that 31 for us, but Klay Thompson said pretty much saying Reggie Miller was one of his favorite players growing up. So he's going to come in here motivated. He's going to want to come here and pass a guy like Reggie Miller. We're talking about from the 3-point stat book. We're talking about in all-time threes made in his career. This is a guy who's going to be looking up. I guess you want to say at the record book pretty much. He says himself, he's playing for championships at this point. He doesn't care about all the stats, but he's going to come in here motivated, because the Golden State Warriors, you're not really looking at him as maybe a guy that you want to bring back, although you saw that he was very vital to that, I guess, to that franchise winning 4 championships, obviously, that dynasty that they were, especially being donned as the Splash Brothers. But when you're adding in these guys, like I said, a Klay Thompson, a Najee Marshall, a Quentin Grimes, this is going to be something more of a versatile team, especially when you're looking at saying, hopefully we're going to get some improvements and some upgrades to their games from a guy like Derek Lively, who we could see stretch the floor a little bit. We can talk about, he's a big man. He's going to play more of that Tyson Chandler role, your team leader on the defensive end, rebounding and just getting guys where they need to be vocally. But when you're talking about maybe a guy like that who can start to stretch the floor a little bit with his 3-point shot, I'm not talking about a guy like looking at Derek Lively saying he's going to be taking 33s or anything a game, but we're talking about in certain stretches, I can see Derek Lively upping to maybe knocking down or taking 1 or 2 or 3s consistently a game. The Dallas Mavericks, to me, have the perfect capability and the potential to just be much of an improved and versatile team, and I feel like the rest of the NBA, if that actually happens, better look out. And adding in, like I said, Spencer Dinwiddie. This is a guy, again, formerly with the Dallas Mavericks. We're talking about going way back. He played with the Brooklyn Nets, who ended up being involved in that trade for Kyrie Irving, and going back to the Brooklyn Nets. And somehow, obviously, we do know the fiasco last year. The Dallas Mavericks pretty much are scouting him. We're trying to get him back to this team, maybe being able to sign for that playoff stretch run. And he ends up choosing the Los Angeles Lakers. We don't have to get into the quote. He said, the Mavericks feel like your mother. You can come there, you can lick your wounds, and you can get right back in the field, but your dad is going to make you go back out there and fight, who he compared to the Los Angeles Lakers. And he wanted to go out there. We're talking about a guy from California. He wanted to go back out there home and see if he can make some noise for them. But obviously, that did not go the way that I'm sure he expected or hoped for, at least. But the Dallas Mavericks still staying locked in, staying tuned into what he was, and bringing in a guy like that to fill his 15th, I guess you want to say the 15th roster spot on this team. The Dallas Mavericks are going to be able to say, Spencer Dinwiddie, we don't need you to even be what you were a couple years ago for this team, but just come in here. I can see a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie getting maybe 10, 15 minutes at certain points, but I can say more consistently, maybe 10 to 12 minutes a night, sparing some Luka Doncic minutes, sparing some Kyrie Irving minutes. And when it comes to being more of that, I guess I want to say consistent ball handler. And we do know he's a better shooter overall than I believe a guy like Dante Exum is. And I feel like we're going to open up this offense. Spencer Dinwiddie is going to be able to fit in there perfectly. And if we're going to be able to see what the Dallas Mavericks are going forward, is going to start with what we're going to have to say. Once again, defensive effort, but just more versatility on offense. Like I said, this is going to be exciting going forward. I'm very excited to see what this team can be, because I think at some points, a lot of people didn't really expect the Dallas Mavericks to do anything last year. You saw so many of the national media, the experts, in quotations, like I like to put it in, the experts, pretty much, you can have the Dallas Mavericks losing in the first round to the Clippers. Then you have the Mavericks losing to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then you have the Mavericks potentially losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And obviously the NBA Finals didn't go the way they expected, but the Dallas Mavericks have got to, I'm going to say right now, I don't believe in moral victories, but the Dallas Mavericks have still got to feel like they're in a good position to be able to get back over that hump. And I'm going to say, look at Klay Thompson, what he said pretty much watching the NBA Finals. He said he watched the Dallas Mavericks pretty much on that entire playoff run, and he said this was some, I guess you want to say, a perfect team, that he said maybe if the cards fall where they need to, that might be a perfect situation for me, because I feel like I can go in there and help them out a little bit in certain spots that I saw they may have been lacking at in a little bit. So that's just exciting. Seeing teams around this, players I'm going to say around this league, especially marquee players, just players with that name and players with that, I just want to say that history behind them of being able to make some plays in this league, looking at the Dallas Mavericks as a destination. So this is going to be exciting. Like I said, bringing in guys like Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes, who I feel, again, that's going to be an underrated piece. I'm going to say that now, so you guys stay tuned into him. And also talking about a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie to come fill out this entire roster. The Dallas Mavericks are going to now go into this thing, I'm going to say, with a viewpoint. Last year, obviously, we had some mixed pieces. Derrick Jones Jr. was a late addition to the roster, obviously. And then you're talking about what PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford being brought in after the All-Star break. Everyone's going to be locked in, going into training camp, going to the rest of this offseason, and now you can just get this team together. They can start to gel, hopefully, much quicker, and we can see if the Mavericks can be potentially seeing themselves sitting in maybe a top 2, top 3 seed in the Western Conference this upcoming season. And the Dallas Mavericks, if we put ourselves in position, and now adding some of that veteran, talking about championship history, obviously Kyrie Irving and Kyrie Irving and Klay Thompson playing against each other so much in the NBA Finals. These guys have been there before, and now you have another added veteran piece, a veteran voice, and a guy that's knocked down many shots. We're talking about a guy in Klay Thompson who has the NBA record for most threes in the game. We're talking about Klay Thompson who has the NBA record for most points in a quarter. I believe, 37 points in a quarter. This is going to be something potentially to keep your eyes on, the Dallas Mavericks as a team going forward, and I'm excited, and I hope you guys are as well. The Dallas Mavericks are still sitting in the offseason right now, so there's not much to really talk about. Everything is up for rumor-based. Everything's up from national media opinion, local media opinion, but at the same time, I'm going to say, Dallas Mavericks fans, just stay locked in, stay tuned in to what this team can potentially do, and just take care of yourselves as well, because we all know it's been very hot out here in Dallas especially. But if we're going to be able to be excited for something, the Dallas Mavericks, to me personally, have given us something to be excited for going into next season, especially coming off this NBA Finals run we just went on. So I appreciate you guys for all the support. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share down below in the comment section, in the description box, I will say, the social media and Twitter. I'm going to say X, whichever you like to call it. The information will be down below in the description box. So go ahead and drop your comments. How do you feel about the Dallas Mavericks offseason up to this point? Is it something that you're excited about? Do you feel like we still kind of missed out on something, or we're missing something right now? Let me know down below in the comment section. I appreciate all you guys' opinions. We will start to roll this thing as the Dallas Mavericks start to make more noise and more news comes out during the offseason. I appreciate you guys for all the support. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.